السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بعرفكم عن نفسي سلامة الشامسي، مدير مشروع متحف زايد الوطني التابع لهيئة أبو ظبي للسياحة والثقافة. اسمحوا لي بس بتكلم بالإنجليش لأنه بيكون أسهل الدسكشن مع الموجودين، لكن إذا حابين بعدين أي حد يسأل بالعربي please do ask. I just wanted to start by saying that through our experience in working in this major project in Abu Dhabi, the Zayed National Museum, and through research, it was very obvious that Sheikh Zayed would always use words such as inshallah or bidnallah in his quotes and his speeches. And he always depends on his faith and his values and his beliefs. And he also tends to use words like, especially when he addresses Emiratis, he would not say the UAE, he would tell them your land, bladkum, ardkum. So really, the content of the museum, the narrative, the build-up of the museum is all inspired by those words, by his values, by his beliefs. And his wisdom, his compassion, his vision, it's really the guide throughout the development of the narrative. And we really want each and every Emirati to feel the belonging to this museum, to feel the pride, and to be part of this development. We also want the visitors to be able to understand our loyalty and love to the country and to our leaders. And we want the residents of the UAE to be part of this history, to be part of this build-up of the history. And of course, Sheikh Zayed himself was behind the build-up of the first national museum in the United Arab Emirates in Al Ain in the 70s. And the Zayed National Museum will be a legacy of Sheikh Zayed's beliefs and values and his rather compelling passion to protect, preserve, and share with the Emiratis and the world the history and culture of the United Arab Emirates. We are all indeed writing a new chapter of the history of the UAE, which will continue for more generations to come. And an essential component of the museum, its collection, of course. And part of this collection will be having contemporary exhibitions. And our talk today, which is a continuation of Multaqa Zayed National Museum, will focus on the evolving nature of museum collections. And to tackle this topic in relation to the National Museum, we have with us today Dr. Venetia Porter, who is the curator of Islamic and Contemporary Middle East at the British Museum. We have Ammar al-Attar and Nada and Salwa, who are artists. And we have Tarek al-Ghoussein, who is a professor of visual arts in the New York University, Abu Dhabi. And what is bringing the artists together, there's one component that is actually bringing them all together, is that all of them, their artwork or what they produce is inspired by the land and the nature and the environment of the UAE. So some of those topics will be tackled within our discussions. Dr. Porter, we'll start with you. If we may, can you tell us on how do you build up the contemporary collection at the British Museum, and how is that in relation to what we are doing with the build-up of the collection of the Zayed National Museum?
Thank you. Can I just have the...
So just also to go back, these are some samples of the collection of the Zayed National Museum, and for you to understand what will be in the collection as part of the contemporary collection of the Zayed National Museum. Of course, we just started the build-up of it, and of course, it will be a continuation of the development of this collection.
Just go back. Thank you very much, Salama. And thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this illustrious panel. You asked me about my work, which is building our collection of modern and contemporary Middle Eastern art. Can people hear me? I feel like I'm whispering here. And I wanted to draw some parallels, in a sense, to the building of our collection, to the building of your collection, because the works that you have shown are really the beginnings of the collection. The works are connected they are by prominent artists connected to place, a lot of them. The works that we're collecting are very much connected to the British Museum and its values. And we are a history museum. and we're best known for our mummies and such like. But we have been collecting modern and contemporary art of the Middle East for some decades now. And I just wanted to give you a little flavour of the types of works that we've been collecting, because as a history museum connected to tradition but also connected to histories today, it's quite interesting when you look at the work of contemporary Middle Eastern artists, and we only collect work on paper. You can see a variety of topics which actually link very much to past traditions. So, for example, here we're looking at a work of Timo Nasri, and what he's interested in is Islamic architecture, and so he's taking those themes and turning them into these sort of beautiful patterns. But we're also, as a history museum, we're also interested in social issues. And this very interesting artist, Laura Bushnag, she went to a literacy project in Egypt, and she was very struck by how all these women were coming to this literacy project for very practical reasons. They wanted to learn to read and write, to help themselves, to help their children, and so on. So that's a work. This is part of a group of works that Laura Bushnag created called I Read, I Write. And then this is a work by Manal Doyan. I'm just showing you one of a very large set here. And this is Manal Doyan, as I'm sure all of you know. She's a very prominent Saudi artist, and she was brought up in Dhahran, or in the Aramco complex. And so she was very interested in tracing the stories, the histories of the people who worked there. And that's also a nice parallel to what we heard in the Emirati Expressions talk and the exhibition, with that like kind of link with place, with history, telling stories again. This is a work by Michael Rakovits. So Michael Rakovits, actually, it's a very jokey work, but actually it's got a very serious content in that he reproduced in papier-mâché the works that had been looted as a result of the Iraq War. So it's a very interesting way of actually talking about the effects of the Iraq War. Migration is perhaps one of the biggest topics, really, that one can think of at the moment. It's in the news absolutely all the time. Turkish artist İpek Düben has done a beautiful artist's book, which is the most delicate thing you've ever seen. She photographs printed on gauze, which completely belie the horror of what is actually happening to these people who are moving out of their place, out of their homes, and in some cases coming back, but not often. An artist like Marwan were also interested in the modernist tradition as well, because my firm belief is that you can't understand contemporary art unless you understand the modern art of the Middle East. And this is one of the great artists, Marwan, who left Syria in the late 1950s, trained with Georg Baselitz, very, very prominent artist. Lebanese artists are so preoccupied by the Lebanese civil war, even though they may have been just children when they experienced them. So this is Khalil Jurej and Joanna Haji Thomas, who worked together, and they took photographs of all the posters of these martyrs, which were on the walls of Beirut, and they studied them, and they went and revisited them as they deteriorated. Iranian artist Sadiq Tarafkan, he's very, very connected to the idea of, he died sadly a few years ago, was connected to this idea of modernity and tradition. How can one actually reconcile these two issues? This was in an Iranian context. Yusuf Nabil, who is, of course, one of a great artists. So this is a wonderful set of images about the first Yemeni community in Britain, who came at the end of the 19th century. They were the first Muslims in the UK, and they came on the ships from Aden. And he went and he interviewed these wonderful people, and this was the last generation of them. And he interviewed them, and he said that they were also extraordinary and noble, and just he felt very humbled by this. This is Nasser Salim, Saudi artist. This incredibly, I love Arabic calligraphy and just the way he has rendered Allah in this this incredibly minimalist way is really something quite extraordinary. Tarek, who we have here, this was part of the works where he's represented many countries at Biennales. Maybe he'll talk to us about that, but this is where he was representing Kuwait. Very powerful work, one of a group. Safia bin Zaghar, who's one really pioneering Saudi artist, and she studied in the UK at St. Martin's School in 1978 and created these most exquisite etchings, but all of her work is about her sense of place. I've just got a couple more, again, more to do with Lebanon. Alfred Tarazi, this is a very recent acquisition. So he takes scenes of the Lebanese Civil War and he makes them into a kind of unrolling film, as it were. There's one in the Kurtzinger Gallery that you can see now. This is Mohammed Ibrahim, wonderful UAE artist. This is a detail from it where he creates, you all know his work, I'm sure, but he just recreates like his own language, his own script. Absolutely wonderful. And this, I don't know if you can see them, but this is a beautiful set of works by Mohammed Kazem, another fairly recent acquisition, a wonderful gift. And this he called it Windows, and this was really capturing the building of mostly Dubai, I think. So I think with this kind of rapid sort of survey, in a sense, I hope I've tried to give a sense of what all these different works, why they're important for us to collect, and the kind of stories that they tell.
So it's because you mentioned like social and political events and memories and stories, so it's really everything that is related to what's happening around the world right now. And the same thing is happening with our development of the collection of the Zayed National Museum as well. It's not only historic objects or manuscripts or whatsoever. Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to Tarek now. Tarek, we saw an example of your artwork, and your art is always inspired by your surroundings and the environment, and you have many series that you worked on Saadiyat Island, where we are right now. So what is important about it, and what made you interested about the surroundings of Saadiyat and the land, and you as a photographer working on this?
Okay, it goes back a long way. I was educated in the US, and there's a movement in photography called the New Topographics that I think heavily influenced my work, which had a lot to do with looking at the nature of the landscape. At the time it was done in the 70s. And I was teaching at the time at American University of Sharjah, and I heard about the museum project, and I had come out to Saadiyat for the first time during one of the art fairs, and just started to see that land was being developed. And I started this project and first showed it during Emirati Expressions, the first one, I think, 2011. 11. It was sort of the start of a commission project that I did. And it was interesting for me to be able to see something from nothing grow. And I was very curious to see how we start to claim the landscape, dictate how it's going to define us, and sort of establish our identity through the landscape somehow. That was very interesting to me, that many of these plants weren't actually indigenous to the region, but we brought them here to sort of beautify this landscape. I called it in beautification.
Can you tell us a bit
obviously
more about this?
Pardon me?
Can you tell us a bit more about this?
I'm in all of them. It's loosely I would call them performances, and we're taking place over about 4 years. And this one, obviously, I was watering the plants. And I was debating about calling this Am I Beautiful Too or In Beautification? And I preferred to go with In Beautification process. This is fertilizer that I laid down, and this was just right at the entrance when you go off to the Louvre Museum. This one I almost passed out. This was in August of, I think, 2012 or 13, and I had to run up and down the patch of stones to create this image.
When was the last time you went and photographed? When was the last time you came and photographed on Saadiyat?
Actually, although now I live here, it's funny, all these pictures were done before I joined New York University, and now I haven't shot since I've been on the island, funny enough. So most of these were from 2010 to 2013. I think last time was about 2013, end of 2013 I was photographing. This is another, that's actually the very first picture I did on Sariyat. And it was somehow felt like walking to the mountain. And it was a play on, I called it Consideration and Miss, but it was the idea of like walking to the mountain, asking about what's going to happen, and almost like Noah asking for the commandments, you could say. And that started the whole process of making these. I call them Consideration Myths also because there was a reference to the myth of Iron John, which is an old famous myth by a fairy tale that Robert Bly, a poet, had written a lot of commentaries about male sort of development, developing oneself, developing one's ego, one's personality, one's becoming an adult. So I just found the development of the island and the identity of the island very much in parallel with the myth.
Okay. So other than the surroundings, do you read myths? Do you enjoy reading? Because you said you also got inspired by this myth that you know about. So other than the land and the environment, what other things inspire your photography?
As I said, the new topographics, poetry, a lot of literature too. I think I think different bodies of work. You're going to a new body of work. I just started doing this.
And this is here in Abu Dhabi Art.
These are in Abu Dhabi.
Exhibited here.
With the gallery I'm with, Bridget Shank. That's with right in front of Nation Tower in Abu Dhabi. Actually, there was a group of buses that were parked. I used to walk by them every day, and I was very captivated by the way they sort of defined their personal space. And I guess I always say, like, I use the film plane as a kind of a way a film director would. Like, the landscape for me is a place where I act out something.
So what is this exactly? Like, is it the window of the bus?
It's a window of all the labor buses, there's a window. So I document how each one sort of really personalized their space. It's an incredible place. And there are about 80 buses that park every day, and they're responsible for bringing all the workers to the rest of the island.
Okay.
And each one is very peculiar for me. That, to me, as I said, was a way of sort of defining and identifying their place.
Exactly. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Ammar. Ammar, photography. What does photography mean to you? And it seems that it's the chosen medium, like with whatever you exhibit all around. So why is that? And if you can also focus a bit on your prayer room series and tell us what's the inspiration behind the prayer room series. And if you can also talk a little bit about the Sabil series, because we're very interested in that as well.
Yeah. Photography for me was like, I started, my first camera was in 2003 when I got my first salary. I bought a camera and I documented on that year in 2003, there was the World Cup, Football Youth World Cup. So there was something that I wanted to document that. I didn't study photography. I didn't have any background of photography. But there was this thing, I wanted to document that. And actually, I'm trying to find these photos. I didn't find them till now. So I started with that. And then I started to document all the family gathering and going out with my family and my friends. Until 2007, 2008, then I started, 2006, 2007, I started to more into trying to take workshops and trying to enhance my skills of photography. And trying to read more about the history of photography and contemporary history of photography.
We have a teacher here in the room, Jack Berlew, can give you some advice,
yes.
I think.
Thank you very much. Tarek al-Ghoussein also.
Tarek as well, yes, of course.
Yeah, so in 2011, we had a really interesting workshop with Stephen Shore. Was during the Marathi Expression 2011. And actually, from that, I got the Visual Diaries series, which I exhibited in 2011. And that series was about my daily life, like photographing, like prayer places where I go, photographing the scenes around me. Like if I go on road trip, I photograph something, photograph my food that I eat. Maybe I was really inspired by Stephen Shore's work because his work is about this also. So from that series in 2011, the prayer room and the Sabil Water was a couple of pictures was
with
starting
Marathi
from that
expressions.
series, yeah, Marathi Expression 2011. And you know, what a coincidence also in 2015, now if you go to the Marathi Expression, I have a special series only in prayer rooms, which is, I call it the fruit from the 2011 exhibition. So it was a personal experience going to, because, you know, I live in Ajman and I work in Dubai, and I go to these highways which has porta cabins, prayer places, and sometimes we pray in the street. So I started to have this idea, why I don't document these places, and especially the places that people made it to be a prayer place, not the mosque or these places. So I started to document these places, and I found out a lot prayer places in industrial areas, and in malls, in business buildings, and towers, and fish market. So
This was in the fish market?
yeah, this fish market in Mecca, because I'll come back to that. So in 2012, I did a complete series of prayer rooms in around UAE. And I exhibited in 2012 in Quadro Gallery. Then I exhibited in Sharjah Binali in 2013. And from there also I started another series, which is in 2015, which is the prayer places in industrial area in Musaffah, which I found recently, which I found it interesting actually, because it is different than whatever I photographed from 2012 to 2014. So I went to, this is one of the places. Musaffah was, you know, in Musaffah, there are lots of mosques, big mosques, but I asked the people there, why, and the workers, why you build these outside your garage or outside your working area? They said, because we don't want to, like, because we don't want to go to the mosque, it's too far, and sometimes we go, it's full. So we built these temporary places. As you know, as a places so we can pray, and plus other people in the neighborhood, they can come and pray. And the idea between the places, if you see, you find a similarity, but again you find something different in each one. Depends on the people who build it. They put their cultural touch on it.
Exactly.
You know? And you will feel it has like something that. You know, it's as different, but at the same time, it is same. All the picture, if you see it together, and this one, like, I really like it too much because it has this contrast between the industrial cranes and, you know, and the peaceful place of.
I have to say, this is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Just in the middle of the parking lot.
Yeah, this is one of this one in the Musaffah Road. While you're going to Musaffah, I found this, and I took all U-turn just to go to this area and ask people, don't start praying, because that was Maghrib prayer. And yeah, I took the photo, then I said, okay, you can pray now. So I hope they will not be. No, so yeah, these are the areas that I find it interesting, and there are a lot, like, and if we go back to some pictures. In end of 2012, 2013, I went to Saudi Arabia. I was invited by al-Attar Gallery to photograph these. These are the photos. So I went there and I photographed prayer rooms in Mecca, Medina, and Jeddah. So I spent there like around 2 3 weeks.
So this is the fish market in Mecca?
In Mecca, yes.
Okay.
Although Mecca is not like on a beach but they have fish market, which was for me first time, like I know about it. But I found this, you know, and these prayer places are really interesting because when you go there, you don't find these carpets, but you see these boxes. People put all the carpets inside it during the other times, and then by the prayer time, they bring all the carpets out and they lay it out and they put it. And you know, I started to find out about these areas by sometimes when I pass by a place, I see a microphone, I see something. I see there's a prayer place here. Prayer place, yeah. So I start sense that you know, this is like in the previous one, not this one. The previous one was also in Jeddah. And yeah.
So are you planning to even widen your prayer series, maybe go around the world, or? different countries. And
Yeah, actually, in last year I was in US and I photographed prayer rooms in Houston, but still not released yet. That is
okay. That would be interesting.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ammar.
Thank you.
So now we'll move to Nada and Salwa, who are still students in Sharjah University. American University of Sharjah.
Yeah.
And you won you want this?
Yeah.
So they won the Crystal Prize, and they will be taking us through the process of that and what did it mean to you to win this prize.
Right, so I'm Nada and my friend Salwa, and as she said, we're from the American University of Sharjah. We're currently on our 4th year, and the project we're about to show was done last year when we were in our 3rd year.
So basically, we're architecture students, but we're interested in many fields other than architecture. So we're interested in art, sculpture, painting, drawing. Like we're still learning all these things, but we're interested even in like mechanisms and making things move. And yeah, the sculpture you're about to see isn't necessarily architecture, but it's like a mixture of art and different things.
When we first came to university, we thought of it as a study phase, and the work phase was something that's different, and the two don't intersect. But then we realized that why don't we just combine the two? Why don't we start working during our university years, since we have the facilities in our college that are easily accessible, and we can ask professors for feedback. And so from that, we started to do small works. Salwa and I collaborated in small works that are not part of the university.
And soon after that, ADMA visited our university and introduced competitions that would happen that year. And the one that interested us most was the Christo and Jean-Claude competition. So we decided to participate in it.
And, all right. So when you look at Christo and Jean-Claude's work, you see that the main aspects they're dealing with is covering objects with fabric or having a unit that's multiplied across a large space. So we thought about this idea and we took it, and here in the Arab world, when you look from afar, you see the abayas that the women wear. It's like an art piece that is scattered in a large space. So we took this aspect of the abaya, we took the abaya and we thought of turning it into an art piece.
So we took a single unit, which is the abaya, and we called the project Kiswa, which means covering in Arabic. And we created an installation that's just like the abaya. It creates a shelter and a covering, and from the outside you just see like a smooth fabric-like structure, and from the inside, if you go into the work, you see the ribs that hold up the structure. And it was kind of an analogy to the abaya or to even the woman.
This was a drawing after we finalized the design. This was a drawing that we came up with. And during the time we were designing this, we thought about different materials. And we thought about using steel because it has a structural quality. It's structural, and at the same time, it's thin. So we can use it, and in our design, we experimented with triangulation to achieve the smooth quality of fabric.
So this is a small-scale model of the whole thing. We did it multiple times to see how the two pieces react together, but it's just made of another material. It's not made of steel. So we decided to, after dealing with that, we decided to move on to the actual material, which is steel. And this is, so we laser cut steel sheets to achieve what we wanted to achieve. And this is a sample of one of the files for laser cutting.
So we designed the whole thing, then we flattened them to be able to cut it. And as we said, it's made in a way that's foldable, that we can fold it to achieve the curves. And this was during the process. We had to try out before we built the large-scale model, we had to try out the material with a smaller scale object, so this was it.
So we built a small scale prototype, so it wasn't the whole thing, at half scale, just to see how like the materials react and how the steel folds. And we changed a few things, obviously, like as we went. And these are the pieces of the full scale model. And as you can see, if you go back, they're made up of pieces. So the whole installation is made up of 12 pieces. And the reason for that is because then only Nada and I can handle everything, and we can build everything ourselves, because the whole piece is 500 kilograms, so it's quite heavy, so we had to.
And part of our design, we had to think of a way to install it and deinstall it, because it was going to be exhibited in multiple sites, multiple locations. This is a picture of when we were
working. So we welded and we laser cut, and we worked with wood for the deck.
And as I was saying, it's made in a way that we can attach it and reattach it easily with a bolt system to transport it easily. And this was right after we finished building the full-scale model. We used our campus to build the project.
They provided us with the facilities and the space, and even this is like the dean's parking, and they were kind enough to they were kind enough to empty it for a few days for us to build the whole thing and then deinstall it for transport.
And this is the first location where it was exhibited. It was in New York University in Abu Dhabi. This was the opening night. And here you can see the insides, the ribs that hold up the structure. And in the picture, you can also see our mentor, Professor Emily Baker. She helped us. She used to deal with steel from before, so she helped us a lot. And also we had another mentor, Professor Daniel Chavez, who helped us with the deck, with building the wooden deck. This is another picture in the New York University site.
And as you may be able to tell, we used mild steel, and we only coated it ourselves with a clear coat. So after a while, it rained, and it went to another site in the desert, and the rust kind of took over. So we took it and sandblasted it and got it professionally painted.
Mm-hmm. And this is the second site. It was put in the Liwa Desert, and this is where it started resting art, and we had to deal with it fast. So after that, it went to Flag Island in Sharjah, and this, you can see the different coating. We, as she said, sandblasted it and painted it again. Mm-hmm. And until now, it hasn't rusted. So.
It's going to be exhibited at the end of this month at Mushraf Park, and we're planning on, we keep working on other projects individually and together without
apart from the university?
Yeah, apart from university. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So I see that I'm sure there were many challenges within the process and the build-up of this. And I just want to know, how did you move it to Liwa? How did the installation went on, and what challenges did you face? Or
the main challenge that we faced during the exhibition time is when it rusted, and we had to deal with it fast. Other than that, the communication was a bit communicating with
the mentors.
Yeah.
Because we were together, we were students together, so we were together all the time, but then
and we had to update our mentors with every decision we made, so it was a bit difficult.
Another challenge was trying to balance all of that, and architecture studio on the side was a little difficult, but it was worth it.
I'm sure. It looks beautiful, really the contrast with the sand dunes and Liwa. It looks very nice. So just go back to Venetia. We spoke about the the contemporary collection, the modern collection at the British Museum. I'm just so curious, when did that start at the British Museum, and how do you relate a historic museum with that? If you can just a bit make it clear for us.
Well, actually, we had we've had many visionary directors at the British Museum, and one of them was somebody called David Wilson, Sir David Wilson, and this is in the late 1980s, and he saw that our collections were sort of stultifying in the mid-19th century, especially as regards the Islamic collections. People who study Islamic art tend to just stop in about 1850, like nothing else goes on after that. And so he encouraged actually groups of us around or departments around the museum, because it was a little bit before I came, to start to think about what is there which is contemporary, which could relate to these collections. And, you know, thinking about what was available in London in the late 1980s and the 1990s, it was basically, it's very hard to imagine it now when there are galleries all over London, you know, selling Middle Eastern art, and here, you know, what's happening here is absolutely extraordinary. But in those days, there was just like probably one person, Rose Issa, who had some contemporary calligraphy, like Ahmed Mustafa and Ali Omar Emres, and that's kind of how we started, but because we didn't really know what there was out there. You know, we were just sitting in London. There was a huge amount, of course, going on in the Middle East that we didn't know about, but you know what was actually available in London. And I think so. It sort of developed from there, starting with a lot of calligraphy, but and you know, modern takes on calligraphy are really extraordinarily interesting. And then sort of pushing the boundaries all the time. And we've just acquired our first piece of video art. That's very exciting for the British Museum. That is just unbelievable.
What's the reaction of the usual visitors of the British Museum? Like, how did they react to that?
Well, it's quite interesting, because people are very taken aback when they see this kind of material,
yeah.
And are surprised by it. We can't always show it, but I'm very keen to show it in context, like when I curated the exhibition on the Hajj in 2012. I put in quite a lot of contemporary work in there, because I think that you can. I tend to sort of see it as a kind of long line. I take a very long view, but it's if you look at the region, whether you're looking at like ancient Assyria or ancient Mesopotamia, and then you're looking at the art of today, we're basically talking about the same region,
yeah.
Creativity coming out of the same region. We're just calling it lots of different things, and I think by looking at it that way, I think it's really interesting how one can find artists who are looking at contemporary issues, but also like the land and the places that they live in.
Yeah.
And you know, one can easily talk about an old story, but through, you know, this kind of work. So I think it's very easy to connect. You just have to find the right pieces.
Yes. Thank you. Tarek, I have a question, since Ammar said we have a teacher on stage as well. So can you tell us a bit of your experience teaching here in Abu Dhabi, teaching art in Abu Dhabi?
In Abu Dhabi only, or in the UAE?
Wherever you want. UAE.
Okay. Yeah, because I started out, I've been here 20 years teaching, and I've really seen the medium grow immensely. And I have to say, Ammar is actually one of the first people I met who really loves photography. I really feel like you enjoyed it. We were in that workshop together with Stephen Shore, and I just felt he had so many cameras, he had so many different kinds of pictures, and that was really nice to see. I've had the pleasure of teaching some great photographers here, Lamia Gargash, Rima Ghaith, a whole generation that I've seen do wonderful work. I think it's really taken off in the last few years as a medium. I think it's a blessing and a curse. I think like Instagram is also a blessing and a curse. I think it's killed photography as much as also made it more accessible to people. I think it lends itself to, it's user-friendly as a medium, I think, for the most part. I think, again, that's where the blessing and the curse comes. A lot of people are picking it up here, but I think what's missing, I think the universities, the galleries, the foundations need to educate, to give them some context of it as a medium. And also, I think the acquisitions by all the collectors and everything, I think it's really throwing the medium off somehow. I think that's also a blessing and a curse. I think we have to take things a little bit slower and sort of take a breath and realize that it takes time, I think, before someone should be collected, I think, but also I think better to put money into their career. Like I've seen with foundations here going on, and it's wonderful. But everyone's responsible for the education, I think, not just the institutions like NYU, AUS, things like that. But some, like I said, really good work is being done here, and I think people need to recognize that.
That's great. Thank you. Ammar, I have a question for you. So we were chatting just a bit on one of your new projects, and I see that, you're really engaged with like also the social aspect of the photography, and how is this really in line with your art and the photography that you produce, and it's also in relation with the inspiration behind the environment of the UAE and the land, and again the stories of people. Maybe if you can share with us like what's your future in photography, or what would you want to do?
Yeah, actually, 2 years back, I got this, concern about what is the history of photography here in UAE. What happened to what happened in the 60s? Not the photographers who were here and took photo. We have one of Jack Pearl, he was here, but also the photo studios that started in the late 60s and maybe before also,
yeah.
as I interviewed. So I started to go to some of the old photographers who had studios here in UAE and started to interview them and listen to their stories, and which I found very interesting because they had lots of stories that no one told us about, and also they had objects and lots of photos that from their stories and from other stories I relate who were the people who sold like enlargers in the 60s, 70s, like because these are things that maybe we don't know, but I find it's important because of the growth of this country and from this early 70s till now, and I find that it's very important to document the commercial side of the photography of photo studios, and I'm sure how the multicultural which was there actually from the 70s, not now,
and even before that, ancient times.
And of course before that, I'm sure. I find it interesting when I saw all the photo studios in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and with all the flowers and the backgrounds, the colorful backgrounds. Yeah.
Flower pot next to you.
So this is a project that I'm trying to to always be like, I know like there are like projects inspired me, like Arab Image Foundation, which they start with Hashim Madani. Akram Za'atari started with Hashim Madani and his collection. So why not we have something in this region, like something that we start here, which we have a lot, but unfortunately it's hidden. It's somebody has to go and
exactly. And I'm sure it will be an amazing exhibition, because everything that relates to stories and memories, and even just having a conversation with your family, asking them like, where did you have your photos taken in the 70s or in the 80s, and those memories really bring back happy moments. It's good. Okay, I think it's time to open up the floor for the audience if anyone has questions to any of the artists here. Questions?
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
I wanted to ask Nada and Salwa, it's very interesting when you have artists working together. And obviously, I've only just met you today, but you have an incredible rapport with each other. So in terms of how you begin a project, just give us a sense of how, does an idea come from one and then it gets picked up by another? How do you work together?
First, we take the idea, take the project, whatever it is, and we start discussing it and thinking of references that can relate to it.
But even before
that.
Even before that, when the idea comes.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, it's like we throw a ball at each other. Like, she either gets an idea or I get an idea, and then we give it to the other person, and then they change it, and then they bring it back, and then we keep improving on it, and like we have different ways of thinking. So
We keep building up on it until it becomes something. Then we take other people's feedback as well to
because
give it. Yeah.
we believe it's like the more people that are involved and that genuinely want to critique your work, the better the work is going to be. So like working with people, it brings a project to another level.
That's an interesting thing, actually, isn't it? At your stage, you're happy to be critiqued. Tarek, do you like to be critiqued at your stage?
I think that's the only way you can grow. Whenever I have an exhibition, I go to my toughest critic, actually, and I think that's important. By the way, your presentation was outstanding. I don't know, you're very, like Venetia said, you're very much in harmony, I have to say. It's great. Yeah, I think critique is essential, and I think part of the problem in this part of the world, and I'm saying it as coming from this part of the world, getting used to critiques, I think. People personalize the work as that's a part of them rather than it's something separate as a work, but I think the only way you can grow is to have an honest, direct, tough critique.
Anyone wants to ask anyone?
By the way, Ammar whispered to me that he wants to do a project with you. So.
What was that?
We had that idea before, like someone came to us and suggested that.
We'd love to.
Yeah. The prayer room, I mean.
Yes. Can I have a mic, please?
Good evening, everybody. We are so lucky to have this art, Abu Dhabi art, I think. And everybody should have the chance to go and attend something like this. Yesterday, I went to 2 events or small events at Emirates Palace. There was a customized tour for the Russian Museum, War and Peace. And then I jumped to Cleveland Clinic to take a tour with some group about how art affects patients. And I saw a beautiful picture done by you, Tarek. But they labelize you, the lady who was taking the tour, that he is a Palestinian man, Kuwaiti born. And that picture was about the identity of a Palestinian who has, no place, or his place is gone and he don't know where to go. I wonder if you can explain about that picture, please.
I only saw it yesterday. I think someone showed it to me yesterday. It was a roundabout picture, I think, right?
You were in a very, very spacious land, and it's not a desert. It's like, you can say it's a valley or a straight land, and some person, one man, is standing there in the nowhere, you can say. Nothing else is there,
okay.
But the land.
I'm really against these labels, actually. I am Palestinian Kuwaiti. I've been here 20 years, which is longer than I've been anywhere, and this country has taken me in also. I don't like to be called Palestinian artist, Kuwaiti artist, Emirati artist. I think any artist that I know would rather be called, if they are an artist or photographer, rather than by nationality. And I think it's actually been a blessing and a curse again. I think it's really great that the Middle Eastern art scene has gotten a lot of attention. But on the other hand, I think that many artists are getting locked into certain labels. You don't look at someone like Mona Hatoum and just call her an Arab artist. She's a very famous Palestinian artist shown all over the world. Mona Hatoum. But we don't labelize her, she's just considered artist.
Maybe she was trying to explain the pictures because they took us in the tour, yep. And this is done by this Emirati guy, this one done,
Yeah, I think that's a problem. I think it's a problem if that's an end point, if it's the beginning of a discussion. I don't have an issue with it, but I think many people stop at that. And then they start to project so much of their understanding of the history of a country onto the image, which maybe has nothing to do with the image, actually. So I think that's the issue with it.
But your work is really, really beautiful, all of you. And the young ladies, you impress everybody, yes. I think, here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Salama.
Thank you. I have another question. If there's anybody else. I'm sorry, I'm always asking questions. I'm so blown away by what's going on here, and the Emirati Expressions exhibition, and outside, and there's a booth which is the Zayed University and the work of the students there. Do you think? Come on, I'm talking to you. Come on, talk about movements. Do you think? There is a sort of general, there seems to be a sort of general trend, a little bit, which I think some of you are picking up on, which is to do with work which is about social history, which is archiving and so on. But I'm just wondering, are there, can one begin to talk about sort of movements here? The fact that all of you artists are very connected to the land, the place in some way, can that be described as a theme? I'm just wondering, or whether there's just lots of disparate things going on. Yeah, I'm just like...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it's the archive movement, it's all in the region, I think, because I see also some artists in Saudi Arabia and other in Kuwait, they are interested in archives and to find out the history of the region through pictures, through papers, through letters, and to access different archive and make artwork out of it. So I'll talk about myself. For me, it was more of interest of the history of the medium that I'm using, which is photography, and how it is like changed, and what was who were the people who were here before, and when you start searching for something, it will lead to different things, and especially when artists try to do things, to try to work with archives, they will come up with something really, like, hopefully it will be interesting for audience to take it, and also it will be in different perspective of artists, other than an institute that will archive, will produce a book out of it or something, which is also something that we need definitely. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, what you said is totally true, I think, because you're kind of archiving with the kiswa and the abaya and all of that. And as you said, many projects with the students, with the professors are really focusing on archiving memories and materials. And us as well with the team working on Zayed National Museum are also working on archiving memories and stories to be included within the collection and the exhibits of the galleries in the museum.
And Tarek's work, of course, is archiving the place. It's an amazing document that you...
So yes, we'll take the last question, and can I have a mic, please?
Good evening. I just want to jump into the debate a little bit. Tarek, the idea of identity and how central it seems, I guess, in a way, for the Arab art scene. And it is a blessing and a curse. And when we think about archiving, we also think about sort of digging up history and protecting it and holding it closer, in a sense to sort of create an identity at the same time. So my question is, if you could place that in terms of art history, is that something that's a linear movement forward? Is that something that normally, sort of happens on its own as sort of a region is sort of pushing forward? I mean, I don't know if you understand my question, but I'm trying to draw a comparison with other sort of regions to see whether this is something that's just strictly an Arab thing, or...
I don't think it is, but it's definitely something that's very prevalent in the last few years here. I think from about late 1990s, I noticed it. And I was very much engaged in it in that period, but I've tried to move away from that myself because I think, it's become like a hot topic, and then it became archives. And one day I found myself against my own will. I was Googling my father's name, and I found like a picture of him with Jackie Onassis, and I collected the picture. So then I started to want to look at archives too. I mean, there's certain trends that are certainly in the air. I think the most problematic for me was the one about identity, because I think it's such a loaded topic, and people throw the word around without really understanding the nature of it. And I think the main issue with the term is that people assume that it's something stagnant. And obviously something like term identity is evolving constantly. And I think that's where I think the idea of having identity work was a problem. And then I found generations of artists here in the Middle East wanting to make work for the Western world because it had to do with Middle Eastern identity. So I actually blame, let's say, outside collectors, but also myself as an instructor, as a teacher here, that getting people to, again, take a breath and not make work that's for for the outside, but work that's true to themselves.
I'd like to add last
Yes.
thing. Working with archive, not just only to collect and keep it. I don't like, especially like some institutes, they like to keep an archive, which is good, which we need to do it. But plus sharing with people, like this is what I'm doing with my very small project, Reverse Moment, which is I'm trying to have social media and share the story with people, like story of different photographers and what I find there and what was the history of this print and what was, because, people, they like to have access to these things, and especially maybe researchers, maybe people who, just normal people who like just interest to hear about the story about this guy who came here like in late 60s till now he's working, and this is his bread actually, the photography. So I think sharing also and collaborating with other people. I'm collaborating with a filmmaker, Hassan Kiani, which we are doing a collaboration. I'm doing the video and he's doing all the production of that video. And this is the collaboration between artists, which is very important. I feel this region should be more and more, and sharing again. Yeah.
I'm sure there are many cultural institutions and art institutions who are willing to do that. That's why we have museums. That's why we have the Cultural District of Saudiyat, is to, as much as we can, to share with the UAE, but also to the rest of the world. Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you all for attending today, and hope you enjoyed. Thank you.